Every life is marked by trials, moments of struggle, uncertainty, and pain that press us to question our purpose and strength. Carl Jung believed that these trials are not meaningless interruptions, but essential parts of the journey toward wholeness. In this lecture, Wisdom for Life's Trials, we explore how Jung's depth psychology offers a guiding light when life feels heavy. He taught that within every difficulty lies the seed of transformation, and that the shadow we fear often hides the very wisdom we need to grow. Rather than escaping suffering, Jung encouraged us to face it with courage, for it is through trials that the unconscious reveals its messages, inviting us to integrate hidden aspects of ourselves. This lecture uncovers how to see hardship as a teacher, how to find meaning in adversity, and how to cultivate the resilience that allows the soul to mature in the face of life's inevitable challenges. How Jung viewed trials as necessary encounters with the shadow that reveal hidden strengths and deeper meaning can be understood by exploring the way he interpreted suffering, crisis, and adversity as essential stages in the journey of individuation. Jung believed that human beings are not meant to avoid struggle, but to be transformed by it. To him, life's trials are not obstacles to be eliminated, but signposts pointing toward the unconscious, toward aspects of the self that remain hidden, denied, or repressed. He used the concept of the shadow to describe those parts of ourselves that we prefer not to acknowledge. Our fears, weaknesses, impulses, and even unclaimed potentials. When we face trials, the shadow emerges, and though this encounter is often painful and unsettling, it contains the very wisdom we need to grow. Jung emphasized that the shadow is not only darkness, but also the gateway to wholeness. For by confronting it, we discover both resilience and meaning that lie beyond our conscious understanding. In everyday life, people tend to create identities that are safe and socially acceptable. We build personas, masks that allow us to function in society, to be liked, respected, or needed. Yet beneath this mask lies the shadow, filled with the traits we do not show the world, sometimes not even to ourselves. Jung believed that life has a way of forcing us to confront the shadow when we least expect it. And it is often through trials that this confrontation takes place. A personal loss, a betrayal, an illness, or a season of failure shatters the persona and exposes us to aspects of ourselves we had hidden away. We may see our anger, our despair, our envy, or our helplessness, and this can be overwhelming. But Jung argued that such moments are not punishments, they are invitations to face what is unresolved within us. By meeting the shadow in times of trial, we discover hidden strengths and depths of resilience that were inaccessible when life was smooth and unchallenged. Jung's writings reveal his conviction that meaning often arises precisely where suffering is most acute. He drew from mythology, religion, and dreams to show how trials are archetypal. They repeat across human experience as initiations into greater awareness. Consider the hero's journey, which Jung often referenced in his exploration of archetypes. The hero is called away from the ordinary world into a realm of trials, where he must face monsters, temptations, and fears. These monsters are symbolic of the shadow, and it is by confronting them that the hero gains wisdom, power, and transformation. Similarly, in our personal lives, the difficulties we encounter are not meaningless disruptions, but archetypal trials. They carry within them the potential to awaken us to our own strength and to deeper truths about existence. Jung believed that those who try to avoid their trials, who suppress pain, deny conflict, or run from their shadow, remain fragmented, while those who embrace them begin the journey toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. The encounter with the shadow during trials is not comfortable, and Jung never minimized the suffering it involves. He acknowledged that facing the shadow often feels like descending into darkness, like losing everything familiar and safe. Yet he insisted that such descents are crucial. He often compared them to alchemy, the ancient process of transforming base metals into gold. Just as alchemists believed that chaos and fire were necessary for transformation, Jung saw trials as the psychic fires that break down the rigid structures of the ego, allowing new integration to emerge. The shadow must be confronted, digested, and integrated, not denied or projected onto others. When this occurs, the trial becomes a source of gold, inner strength, wisdom, and meaning that could never have been found otherwise. Jung's concept of compensation further illuminates why trials bring the shadow to the forefront. He argued that the unconscious seeks balance whenever the conscious ego becomes one-sided. If we identify too much with success, control, or rationality, the unconscious compensates by surfacing failure, chaos, or irrational impulses through life's circumstances. Trials thus arise as a balancing force, not to destroy us, but to correct us. In the process, they reveal the limitations of our ego and the reality of our shadow. By experiencing failure, we learn humility. By facing loss, we learn compassion. By enduring uncertainty, we learn trust. These strengths, however, cannot be learned theoretically. They must be embodied through lived trials. For Jung, this was the paradoxical wisdom of suffering. It humbles the ego while awakening the deeper self. Dreams, which Jung considered the royal road to the unconscious, often reflect this process. During times of trial, people frequently dream of confrontations with dark figures, wild animals, or threatening landscapes. Jung interpreted these images as manifestations of the shadow appearing to be faced and integrated. A dream of being chased, for example, may represent an aspect of the self that one is avoiding in waking life. A trial in the outer world may correspond with this inner drama, forcing the individual to stop running and turn toward what is feared. When integration occurs, the threatening figure may transform in later dreams into a guide or ally, symbolizing that what was once rejected has now become a source of strength. This dynamic reflects how trials in waking life, painful as they are, can lead to the reconciliation of inner conflicts and the discovery of hidden resources. Jung's emphasis on the necessity of trials also connects to his belief that the psyche has a teleological nature. That is, it is oriented toward growth and meaning. Trials are not random accidents. They serve the larger purpose of moving us toward individuation, even when suffering seems senseless. Jung encouraged people to search for the symbolic meaning within it. This does not mean forcing false optimism, but rather asking, what is this difficulty revealing about myself? What part of me is being challenged to grow? What hidden strength is being called forth? In this way, trials become meaningful, not because they are pleasant, but because they serve a purpose in the unfolding of the self. Jung observed that those who can discover meaning in their suffering are often able to endure it with greater resilience and even transform it into a source of creativity and wisdom. The role of trials in revealing hidden strengths can be illustrated by countless examples. A person who loses their job may discover resilience and adaptability they never knew they had, opening the door to new opportunities. Someone who endures heartbreak may uncover the capacity for deeper self, love and compassion toward others. An illness may reveal inner courage and a renewed appreciation for life. Jung would see these not as coincidences, but as expressions of the psyche's potential becoming actualized through difficulty, the shadow of fear, despair, or limitation. Once faced, yields a hidden strength that enriches the personality. These transformations, however, are not automatic. They depend on one's willingness to engage consciously with the trial, to ask what the unconscious is trying to reveal. Jung's approach also emphasized the danger of refusing to face the shadow during trials. When people avoid the lessons of suffering, they often project their shadow onto others, blaming the world, fate, or other people for their pain. This creates cycles of conflict and prevents growth. Jung urged individuals to take trials as mirrors, reflecting back their own unacknowledged aspects. A conflict with another person may be an externalization of an inner conflict. A failure in life may reveal an overinflated ego that needs humility. By owning these lessons rather than projecting them, the individual integrates the shadow and gains strength. This integration is what makes trials transformative rather than merely destructive. Religious and mythological traditions, which Jung studied extensively, support this view of trials as encounters with the shadow. The descent of Christ into the wilderness, the trials of Job, the journey of Buddha under the Bodhi tree, all symbolize the confrontation with darkness that precedes enlightenment or transformation. Jung saw these stories as archetypal, reflecting the universal truth that wisdom and strength are born from suffering. By interpreting our own trials within this larger symbolic framework, we can recognize that we are participating in a timeless human pattern. This recognition itself provides meaning, reminding us that our struggles are not unique punishments, but part of the universal process of becoming whole. In personal accounts, Jung often spoke of his own confrontation with trials as essential to his psychological discoveries. His famous confrontation with the unconscious in midlife, where he experienced visions, inner voices, and symbolic imagery, was itself a trial that forced him to face his shadow. Out of this period of crisis emerged his most significant contributions to psychology, including the ideas of archetypes, individuation, and the collective unconscious. This illustrates that even Jung himself did not speak of trials from abstraction, but from lived experience. He knew firsthand that crisis and suffering reveal the depths of the psyche and open pathways to wisdom that cannot be reached otherwise. Thus, when Jung viewed trials, he saw not meaningless suffering, but necessary encounters with the shadow that reveal hidden strengths and deeper meaning. He understood that without these encounters, the ego remains shallow, the persona rigid, and the self undeveloped. With them, however, the individual can grow into authenticity, resilience, and wholeness. Trials serve as the alchemical fire that transforms the raw material of the psyche into the gold of wisdom. They force us to see what we would rather ignore. But in doing so, they open the possibility of becoming more than we were before. Through this lens, life's trials become not only bearable, but profoundly valuable, shaping the soul in ways that ease and comfort never could. The role of suffering in individuation, and how adversity becomes a catalyst for inner transformation is central to Carl Jung's understanding of psychological and spiritual growth. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche, cannot occur in comfort alone. It is in the crucible of suffering that the ego is challenged, the shadow emerges, and the deeper self begins to assert itself as a guiding presence. Suffering, in this sense, is not merely an unfortunate byproduct of human existence, but an essential force that compels us to grow beyond the limited boundaries of our conscious identity. While many people spend their lives trying to avoid pain, Jung emphasized that pain and adversity hold within them the seeds of transformation, and that those who courageously engage with their suffering find meaning, resilience, and a deeper connection to the self. At the core of Jung's perspective is the understanding that the human psyche is composed not only of the conscious ego, but also of vast unconscious layers, including the personal unconscious, the shadow, and the collective unconscious. The ego, which strives for stability and control, often resists the pull of these unconscious forces. It seeks comfort, predictability, and affirmation, and it avoids anything that threatens its authority. Yet life inevitably brings moments that destabilize the ego: loss, failure, illness, betrayal, existential uncertainty. These moments of suffering shatter the illusion of control, breaking open the psyche and allowing unconscious material to surface. Jung saw this shattering not as destruction, but as opportunity, for it is precisely in these moments of vulnerability that the unconscious reveals its wisdom. Through suffering, the ego is forced to confront its limitations and to recognize that wholeness cannot be achieved by willpower alone, but requires dialogue with the unconscious. Adversity often strips away the persona, the social mask we wear to meet collective expectations. When life is smooth, the persona can remain intact, convincing us that we are nothing more than the roles we play: the successful professional, the caring parent, the loyal friend. Yet, when trials strike, these roles are often threatened or dismantled. A job loss undermines the professional identity. A divorce shatters the image of family stability. Illness strips away the role of strength and independence. In such moments, the persona crumbles and the raw self beneath is exposed. Jung believed this was a painful but necessary step in individuation. Without the collapse of the persona, the deeper self remains hidden. Suffering then becomes the doorway through which the authentic self can emerge, a catalyst for moving beyond surface identity toward inner truth. Jung's concept of the shadow also plays a key role in how suffering fosters transformation. The shadow contains all that we reject or repress, our fears, flaws, desires, and weaknesses. In times of comfort, it is easy to keep the shadow hidden, projected onto others, or denied altogether. But suffering has a way of forcing us to encounter it directly. A failure may reveal our arrogance. A conflict may uncover our anger. A loss may expose our dependency or fear of abandonment. At first, these revelations are uncomfortable, even humiliating. Yet Jung argued that by integrating the shadow, by acknowledging and accepting these hidden aspects, we become more whole. Suffering is often the trigger that makes this integration possible, for only in adversity do we have the courage or necessity to face the parts of ourselves that the ego would otherwise keep in the dark. Another important aspect of suffering in individuation is its capacity to deepen empathy and compassion. Jung believed that individuation is not only about becoming an isolated, self-sufficient individual, but also about developing genuine connection with others. Suffering teaches us humility, reminding us of our shared vulnerability as human beings. Those who have endured suffering often become more compassionate, more attuned to the struggles of others, because they recognize in others the same pain they have faced within themselves. This compassion, however, is not superficial. It arises from the integration of suffering into one's own psyche, from the realization that pain is not an aberration, but a fundamental part of the human condition. In this way, suffering expands our capacity for relationship, transforming not only the self, but also the way we relate to the world. Jung often turned to mythology, alchemy, and religious symbolism to explain how suffering catalyzes transformation. In alchemy, the process of transformation requires the stage of nigredo, or blackening, a phase of chaos, dissolution, and death before the emergence of new life. Jung saw this as a metaphor for the psychological experience of suffering. When adversity strikes, life may feel like it has dissolved into darkness, as if everything solid has disintegrated. Yet this stage is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. Out of the chaos of suffering arises new insight, new order, and new integration. Similarly, mythological figures often undergo trials, descents into the underworld, dark nights of the soul before achieving wisdom or renewal. Jung interpreted these stories as archetypal expressions of the human journey, showing that suffering is woven into the very fabric of transformation. Dreams, too, reflect this process. In times of suffering, individuals often dream of death, darkness, or disintegration. While these dreams may feel frightening, Jung saw them as symbolic representations of the psyche undergoing transformation. The death in dreams is not literal, but a symbol of the death of old identities, old patterns, and old attachments that must be released for new growth to occur. Suffering brings these dreams to the surface because the unconscious is actively participating in the process of change. By attending to these dreams, individuals can gain insight into the meaning of their suffering and the direction of their growth. The unconscious, Jung taught, does not merely reflect pain, but provides symbols and guidance for navigating it. A critical element of Jung's view is that suffering is not inherently meaningful, but can become meaningful when approached consciously. Many people endure trials but emerge bitter, resentful, or defeated. What makes suffering transformative, according to Jung, is the decision to engage with it, to seek its message rather than deny it. This requires courage, humility, and a willingness to question one's assumptions about life. It means asking, what is this suffering teaching me? What illusions are being stripped away? What hidden strength is being called forth? In this way, suffering becomes not just something to endure, but something to work with, a dialogue between the conscious ego and the unconscious self. For Jung, this conscious engagement is the essence of individuation, the process by which we become whole. The relationship between suffering and creativity further illustrates its transformative role. Jung observed that many artists, writers, and thinkers produce their greatest work out of periods of suffering. Pain disrupts ordinary patterns, opening the psyche to new perspectives and deeper emotions. The act of expressing this suffering through art, writing, or symbolic activity becomes a form of integration, turning pain into creation. For Jung, this creative process was not limited to artists, but available to all individuals. By engaging symbolically with suffering, through journaling, dream work, spiritual practice, or active imagination, we transform raw pain into meaning. Creativity becomes the bridge between suffering and growth, allowing adversity to catalyze not only inner change, but also outward expression of the psyche's depths. Spiritually, Jung saw suffering as a confrontation with the mystery of existence. He noted that people often turn to religion or spirituality most intensely during times of trial, seeking meaning beyond the ego's limited perspective. While he did not advocate for any single doctrine, Jung recognized the value of spiritual frameworks in helping individuals endure suffering. He saw the archetype of the self as the deepest source of meaning, a symbol of wholeness and the divine within. Suffering, in this view, strips away superficial identities and compels us to turn inward toward this deeper center. It is often in moments of greatest despair that individuals experience a sense of transcendence, a glimpse of unity or purpose beyond the immediate pain. For Jung, this was not escapism, but the natural unfolding of the psyche, which uses suffering as a pathway to connect us with the self. The social dimension of suffering also plays a role in individuation. Jung recognized that modern culture often promotes avoidance of pain, emphasizing comfort, success, and superficial happiness. This avoidance, however, leaves individuals ill-prepared for life's inevitable hardships. When suffering does come, they may feel isolated, as though something abnormal has happened to them. Jung challenged this cultural narrative by framing suffering as universal, archetypal, and necessary. By normalizing suffering as part of the human journey, he invited individuals to see their trials not as private failures, but as shared human experiences that connect them to others and to the collective unconscious. This recognition reduces isolation and encourages individuals to seek meaning rather than hide their pain. From a developmental perspective, Jung believed that suffering often marks critical turning points in life. In early adulthood, suffering may challenge us to separate from parental expectations and establish our own identity. In midlife, suffering often emerges as the collapse of old goals, roles, and ambitions, pushing us to turn inward and confront the neglected aspects of the self. In later life, suffering may take the form of aging, loss, or mortality, inviting us to reconcile with the ultimate mystery of existence. At each stage, suffering acts as a catalyst, dismantling what no longer serves and pushing the individual toward deeper integration. Without suffering, these transitions may remain superficial, leaving the individual stagnant or incomplete. Ultimately, Jung's view of suffering reveals a paradox. What we most wish to avoid often contains the very key to our growth. Adversity forces us to see what the ego hides, to confront the shadow, to relinquish illusions, and to connect with the deeper self. It teaches humility, compassion, and resilience, qualities that cannot be developed in comfort alone. Through suffering, we discover that we are more than our roles, more than our successes, more than our ego's fragile sense of control. We discover a depth of being that is resilient, creative, and meaningful. This is why Jung saw suffering not as an enemy, but as an ally, a catalyst for individuation and the unfolding of the wholeness that lies within each of us. Practical wisdom from Jung on facing life's challenges with resilience, integration, and conscious growth begins with his belief that the human psyche is not fragile, but innately oriented toward wholeness, capable of transforming suffering into strength when approached with awareness. Jung's psychological system was never simply about diagnosing problems or categorizing behavior. It was about equipping individuals with the tools to engage life's difficulties as opportunities for depth and meaning. He understood that trials are inevitable, but whether they destroy or transform us depends on how we respond. Resilience, integration, and conscious growth form the triad of practical wisdom that allows us to navigate adversity not as passive victims, but as active participants in our own individuation. Resilience, in Jung's framework, is not the denial of pain or the stoic suppression of emotion, but the capacity to endure suffering while remaining open to its lessons. He often emphasized that resilience emerges when we stop resisting the reality of hardship and begin to engage it as part of our journey. This means shifting from the question, why is this happening to me, to what is this teaching me? Jung's practice of active imagination illustrates this principle. Rather than fleeing from troubling dreams, emotions, or images, he encouraged individuals to interact with them consciously, asking what they reveal about the psyche. By treating difficulties as meaningful communications from the unconscious, resilience is strengthened, for the individual no longer feels helpless in the face of adversity, but empowered to learn from it. Resilience thus arises from trust in the psyche's self-regulating nature, a trust that suffering has a purpose even if the conscious mind cannot yet grasp it. Integration is another vital aspect of Jung's practical wisdom. Trials often expose parts of ourselves that we have ignored, denied, or repressed. The anger that surfaces in conflict, the fear that emerges in uncertainty, the despair that arises in loss, these are not simply obstacles, but signals from the shadow, parts of the self waiting to be acknowledged. Jung taught that ignoring or repressing these aspects leads to imbalance, a neurosis. By contrast, integrating them leads to wholeness. For example, a person who faces betrayal may uncover a hidden capacity for discernment and self-protection, qualities that were suppressed in the desire to trust others blindly. By integrating these qualities, the individual becomes stronger and wiser without becoming bitter. Practical integration means asking, what part of myself is being revealed through this difficulty, and how can I accept it as part of my wholeness? Jung's wisdom lies in reframing trials as mirrors that reflect the hidden dimensions of the psyche, urging us to integrate what was once in shadow. Conscious growth, the third element, refers to the choice to engage adversity with awareness rather than denial or projection. Jung believed that much of human suffering is prolonged not by the trial itself, but by the refusal to face it consciously. When difficulties arise, many people project blame outward, attributing their pain to others or to fate, rather than asking what inner work is being demanded of them. Jung saw this as a missed opportunity for the unconscious uses life's challenges to push us toward greater individuation. Conscious growth requires the courage to turn inward, to examine our dreams, emotions, and reactions, and to seek the symbolic meaning of our suffering. It also requires patience, for transformation is often slow, unfolding in stages rather than instant breakthroughs. By choosing to approach adversity with curiosity and humility, we align ourselves with the psyche's natural drive to a wholeness. One of Jung's most practical teachings for facing challenges is the idea of holding the tension of opposites. Life often presents us with conflicts that seem irreconcilable. Love and loss, hope and despair, freedom and responsibility. The ego's instinct is to choose one side and reject the other, but Jung advised holding both in awareness without collapsing into premature resolution. By doing so, a third possibility often emerges, a new perspective that transcends the conflict. For instance, in the face of failure, one might hold both the pain of disappointment and the possibility of new direction. By not denying either, the individual discovers resilience and creativity. This practice of holding opposites cultivates resilience because it prevents despair, fosters integration because it acknowledges both sides of the psyche and supports conscious growth, because it allows transformation to unfold naturally. Jung also emphasized the importance of symbols in navigating adversity. Symbols bridge the conscious and unconscious, carrying meaning that cannot be fully articulated in rational terms. In times of trial, the psyche often produces symbolic dreams, fantasies, or images that point toward healing. Practical wisdom lies in paying attention to these symbols, reflecting on them, and allowing them to guide us. For example, dreaming of a journey through a dark forest may symbolize the descent into the unconscious during a period of suffering, suggesting that perseverance will lead to light. Engaging with such symbols through journaling, art, active imagination allows the individual to dialogue with the unconscious, transforming suffering into guidance. Jung's practical advice here is to take the language of the unconscious seriously, for it often contains the wisdom needed to endure and grow through trials. Another layer of Jung's wisdom is his recognition of the collective unconscious and archetypes. He saw personal suffering as part of larger human patterns, meaning that our trials are not isolated, but archetypal. When facing betrayal, loss, or failure, we are participating in patterns that countless others have endured throughout history. This recognition itself can be healing, for it reduces the sense of isolation and reminds us that suffering connects us to the collective human story. Jung suggested turning to myth, religion, or cultural stories to find resonance with one's struggles. By seeing our difficulties mirrored in the stories of heroes, saints, or mythic figures, we recognize that suffering is not meaningless, but part of the archetypal journey toward transformation. This perspective encourages resilience by placing individual pain within a universal framework, reminding us that adversity has always been the forge of human growth. Jung's emphasis on community and relationship also offers practical wisdom for resilience. While individuation is a deeply personal journey, it does not occur in isolation. Trials often strain relationships, but they can also deepen them. When approached consciously, Jung observed that projection is most active in relationships. When we disarm parts of ourselves, we project them onto others. Trials often intensify these projections, leading to conflict. The practical wisdom here is to use these conflicts as opportunities to reclaim projections, recognizing in others the qualities we need to integrate within ourselves. For instance, anger at another's selfishness may reveal our own neglected need for self-care. By owning these projections, relationships become sites of growth rather than cycles of blame. Conscious engagement with relationships during adversity fosters both individuation and deeper connection with others. Jung's approach to resilience also included the practice of patience with the psyche. He often warned against rushing the process of transformation. In times of suffering, the ego seeks quick solutions or escapes, but the unconscious works in its own rhythms. Jung encouraged individuals to trust this timing to allow the psyche to unfold gradually, rather than forcing premature resolution. Practical resilience involves surrendering control, acknowledging that healing and integration often require time. This surrender is not passive, but an active trust in the wisdom of the unconscious. By cultivating patience, individuals endure trials without collapsing into despair, recognizing that transformation is often occurring beneath the surface, even when it is not immediately visible. Jung's personal experiences also reflect his practical wisdom. During his midlife crisis, when he was overwhelmed by visions, dreams, and inner turmoil, he did not suppress these experiences or flee from them. Instead, he engaged them through active imagination, drawing, and reflection. He treated his suffering as meaningful communication from the unconscious, and out of this engagement emerged many of his key insights into archetypes, the collective unconscious, and individuation. His example demonstrates that resilience, integration, and conscious growth are not abstract ideals, but lived practices. By courageously engaging with his own trials, Jung modeled the very wisdom he taught. Finally, Jung's wisdom emphasizes the central role of meaning in resilience and growth. He often echoed the idea that a person can endure almost any suffering if they find meaning in it. Meaning transforms suffering from senseless pain into a purposeful experience that contributes to growth. Practical wisdom then involves seeking meaning in adversity, not superficial explanations, but deep symbolic meaning that connects the trial to the journey of individuation. This search for meaning can be supported through reflection therapy, creative expression, or spiritual practice. By finding meaning, individuals transform adversity into a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block, aligning suffering with the larger trajectory of growth and wholeness. Taken together, Jung's practical wisdom on resilience, integration, and conscious growth provides a roadmap for navigating life's challenges. Resilience arises from engaging suffering as meaningful rather than resisting it. Integration occurs when we use adversity to acknowledge and accept hidden parts of ourselves. Conscious growth unfolds when we approach trials with awareness, patience, and humility, trusting the psyche's natural drive toward wholeness. Jung's insights remind us that life's difficulties are not detours from our path, but essential parts of it, shaping us into individuals capable of depth, authenticity, and wisdom. By applying these principles, we transform suffering into growth, adversity into resilience, and trials into opportunities for becoming who we truly are.